The morning the Alpha King died, the world itself seemed to lose its breath. The clouds hung heavy, their silver linings dimmed beneath the weight of grief, and even the wind refused to move through the ancient pine trees that bordered the capital of the Bloodmoon Pack. The palace gates, once alive with warriors and messengers, stood silent, dressed in black banners that whispered of tragedy and loss. They said the king died in battle. They said his final roar echoed through the valley before he fell, surrounded by enemies who dared to challenge the might of an alpha born beneath a blood moon. His warriors brought home his broken body, or what they believed was his body, wrapped in silver cloth, drenched in his blood, his heartbeat gone. But not everyone believed he was gone. Far away, hidden in the lower quarters of the city, an Omega girl named Lyra worked quietly in the healing huts, tending to the wounded that came from the same battlefield. Her hands, small and soft but strong from years of labor, glowed faintly with the gift she never spoke of, the ability to feel the faintest pulse of life when everyone else believed there was none. She was born an outcast. Omegas in her world were shadows, servants, cleaners, healers, those whose names were forgotten even when their work saved lives. She had grown up unseen, unwanted, and unworthy in the eyes of the powerful wolves who ruled above her. But Lyra had one thing that no title could give or take: a heart that refused to stop believing in miracles. That morning, when the whispers of the Alpha's death reached her, something in her chest twisted painfully. She did not know him, at least not personally. But she had seen him once. Years ago, during the harvest ceremony, when he stood tall among his people, his silver eyes glowing beneath the moonlight, his presence commanding both fear and devotion. There had been something in those eyes, a loneliness only she seemed to recognize. Now, the thought of those same eyes closing forever felt wrong, as though the universe itself had made a mistake. As the palace prepared for the burial, every pack in the kingdom gathered to mourn. The High Elders ordered that no Omega be allowed near the sacred ground where the king's body would rest. Yet Lyra could not rest. That strange, burning instinct within her whispered that something was not right. For days she had been tending to the dying warriors who had fought beside the king. One of them, an old soldier named Fenric, muttered something strange before he passed, words that haunted her even as his spirit left his body. The king, he wasn't gone, his eyes flickered when they laid him down. Those words struck her like lightning. The healers who examined the body must have missed something. She had to see him, even if it meant defying every law of the pack. That night, while the moon rose full and pale above the morning city, Lyra wrapped herself in a dark cloak and made her way to the palace. Guards surrounded the burial chamber, but her small frame and quiet steps made her almost invisible. She moved like a shadow through corridors draped in black silk, her heart pounding, her breath shallow. Inside the grand chamber lay the coffin, carved from obsidian wood, decorated with the crest of the Bloodmoon Pack. The air was cold and heavy with the scent of incense. Candles flickered weakly around the coffin's edge, their flames trembling like frightened hearts. Lyra's hands shook as she approached. She shouldn't be here. If she was caught, the punishment would be death. But something stronger than fear guided her, that faint whisper from within that always told her when life lingered near the edge of death. She pressed her hand against the cold surface of the coffin, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a spark. Barely there, almost impossible, but real. A heartbeat. Faint, slow, fragile. Her knees weakened as tears filled her eyes. "He's not dead," she whispered into the silence, her voice trembling with awe and terror. "He's still here." The truth crashed over her like a wave. The Alpha King, whose death had shaken the realm, whose funeral was set for dawn, was alive. But time was running out. Lyra knew that once the burial began, his body would be sealed forever beneath sacred earth, unreachable by any mortal hand. If she didn't act now, that faint heartbeat would fade into nothingness, and the truth would die with him. She had to save him. The moon above the palace broke through the clouds as if blessing her decision. Its silvery light spilled across the coffin, casting her shadow long and trembling against the marble floor. Lyra took a deep breath, her fear melting into resolve. She pulled open the coffin. And for the first time, she saw him, the Alpha King, Kale. Even in unconsciousness, his presence was overwhelming. His chest rose and fell barely perceptibly, his skin pale but still warm. Scars covered his arms and shoulders, but beneath them pulsed the raw, unbroken strength of a being too powerful to die so easily. Her healing gift surged through her fingers as she pressed her palms to his heart. She called out silently to whatever power guided her gift, pleading for his life. Her hands glowed faintly gold, the air thickening with unseen energy. Cale's chest jerked. Once. Then again. The faint pulse became steady. His breath deepened, his body trembling as life returned. Lyra gasped, her tears falling freely now. "You're alive," she whispered, though he could not yet hear her. "You were never gone." Outside, the bells gone to toll, the signal that dawn was near, that the burial procession was gathering. She had only minutes to hide him. But for the first time in her life, Lyra was not afraid. She was no longer an invisible Omega girl. She was the reason a king's heart beat again, and soon, the world would know it. The morning broke slowly over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of morning gray. The valley below, once alive with the howls of wolves greeting the dawn, now echoed only with the soft murmur of sorrow. Bells rang from the towers of the palace, each deep toll carrying the weight of finality, the supposed farewell of the Alpha King, Cale of the Bloodmoon Pack. The entire kingdom had gathered for the burial. Warriors in black armor stood shoulder to shoulder, their heads bowed, their spears tipped downward in respect. Elders draped in ceremonial robes chanted ancient words meant to guide the spirit of their fallen Alpha to the afterlife. The Queen Mother wept silently beside the coffin, her tears darkening the fabric of her veil. But beneath the palace, in the quiet shadows of the old catacombs, Lyra was fighting time itself. Her hands trembled as she wrapped the king's body, alive but weak, in thick woolen cloths. His breathing was shallow, his pulse faint but steady, proof that her instincts had been right. The spark of life she'd felt had not been a dream. The Alpha still lived. She had found a forgotten chamber below the burial hall, one of the ancient healing crypts long sealed and abandoned after the Great War. Dust clung to the walls like cobwebs, and the air was thick with the scent of herbs long dead. But here, away from prying eyes, she could work. Her heart raced as she mixed potions from her satchel, crushed moonflower petals, silverroot, and drops of her own blood. The potion shimmered faintly as she pressed it to his lips, praying that it would strengthen him enough to survive. "You cannot die," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not yet. Not while your people still need you." Above her, the bells tolled again, this time faster, signaling that the burial ceremony was beginning. The priests were preparing to carry the coffin to the sacred ground. But the coffin was no longer there. The one that lay in the burial chamber now was empty, filled with stones wrapped in white linen, a desperate deception Lyra had crafted in the dead of night. She had switched the bodies before dawn, replacing the real king with an illusion of death. She didn't know how long her secret would last. The elders might notice. The Queen Mother might sense the truth. But for now, the world believed the king was dead. And that lie was the only thing keeping him safe. Lyra moved her hand across his chest again, feeling the faint warmth spread through his ribs. His heartbeat was stronger now, his breath deeper. His face, though pale, was peaceful. For the first time, he looked almost human, stripped of the feral power that had once made him seem untouchable. She found herself studying his features, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. He had always seemed like a legend, a man born of war and moonlight, too far above for an Omega to even speak his name. But here, lying before her, he was fragile, mortal, real. A noise above made her flinch. Voices, footsteps, guards. They were moving toward the crypts. Her pulse quickened. She had to act fast. Pulling her cloak tighter, she covered his body with blankets and slipped into the narrow tunnel behind the altar. From there, she could see the shadows of the guards entering the upper level, their torches casting orange light across the stone. "Search everywhere," one barked. The elders felt a shift in the energy of the chamber. Something isn't right. Lyra pressed herself against the cold wall, holding her breath as the torches passed. The scent of smoke and iron filled her lungs, and she fought the urge to cough. The footsteps echoed for several minutes before fading away. Only when silence returned did she dare to move again. She returned to Cale's side. His eyelids flickered, and for the first time, she saw movement. A faint groan escaped his throat. Lyra froze. Her heart leapt. He was waking. Slowly, painfully, Cale's eyes opened. They were the color of molten silver, bright even in the darkness. For a moment, confusion clouded them. Then, instinctively, his hand shot up, gripping Lyra's wrist with surprising strength. She gasped, but didn't pull away. The Alpha King was awake. He blinked several times, his gaze unfocused, trying to make sense of where he was. His voice, rough from disuse, came out as a whisper. "Where am I?" Lyra swallowed hard, emotion tightening her throat. She wanted to tell him everything, that he had been declared dead, that the whole kingdom was burying a lie while she fought to save his life. But the fear of being caught silenced her. "You're safe," she said softly, though her words trembled. "Please, don't move yet." Cale tried to sit up, but his strength betrayed him. His body fell back, his breath ragged. "The battle," he murmured, his eyes clouding with memory. "I remember, the betrayal?" Lyra frowned. "Betrayal?" His gaze met hers, sharp, piercing, even in weakness. "Someone poisoned me before the fight. It wasn't the enemy that struck the killing blow." Her heart stopped. That meant someone from within the pack had tried to kill him. Before she could ask more, his eyes fluttered shut again, exhaustion taking him. Lyra sat beside him, torn between fear and awe. If what he said was true, then bringing him back meant far more than saving a life. It meant uncovering a conspiracy buried deep within the kingdom's heart. Above them, the burial ceremony reached its peak. The elders chanted the final rites, sealing the empty coffin beneath stone. The people wept. The queen whispered her last goodbye. And as the first shovel of earth fell over the false grave, the true king drew another breath in the dark, his heart beating stronger than before. Lyra stayed by his side all through the day, feeding him water drop by drop, whispering small prayers to the moon goddess. When night fell again, she finally allowed herself to rest. She did not know that by saving him, she had changed her fate forever. By dawn, the news would spread, that strange things were happening in the crypts, that the moon's light seemed to glow stronger near the burial site. The whispers of the supernatural would grow. And among them, one dangerous rumor would rise like a storm. The days following the burial were quiet, almost unnaturally so. The kingdom mourned above ground, but below, in the hidden chamber beneath the palace, life fought its quiet, stubborn way back into the Alpha King, Cale. His body, though battered and poisoned, responded to Lyra's careful ministrations. Every breath he drew was a triumph, every weak heartbeat a small victory. Lyra stayed by his side without rest. Time had lost its meaning in the dimly lit crypts. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls like silent witnesses. The scent of moonflower and silverroot filled the air, mingling with the faint metallic tang of his blood. Lyra's hands, steady from years of healing, hovered constantly over him, ready to soothe a shiver or strengthen a pulse. Cale's awakening was gradual. Each day, his eyes would open a little longer, his limbs would twitch with small attempts at movement, and his chest would rise and fall with increasing strength. Lyra watched him like a hawk, every change in his expression sending tremors through her heart. She could not help but notice the faintest flickers of vulnerability, a side of the king that the world above had never seen, the man behind the legend. But with life came memory, and with memory came pain. Cale remembered the battle, the strike meant to kill him, and the betrayal that had allowed it. His brows would furrow as he drifted between consciousness and sleep, muttering fragments of words, names, places. Lyra listened carefully, noting every detail, every syllable that could be a clue to the hidden enemy. She dared not speak his name aloud in case the wrong ears heard, but inside her, the words formed a vow. She would protect him at all costs, even if the entire kingdom believed him dead. The first night he fully awoke, Cale's silver eyes opened with startling clarity. They pierced the dimness of the chamber and found Lyra's gaze. For a moment, he seemed to study her, as though seeing her for the first time. His lips parted, but no words came. Lyra held his hand, small against his larger one. "You're safe now," she whispered. "No one can hurt you here." Cale's grip was faint, but firm. Then, as if realizing something crucial, his eyes widened. "The crown? The throne?" His voice was hoarse, every word costing him effort. They think I am dead? Yes, Lyra said gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. They buried an empty coffin. The world believes you're gone. Only you and I know the truth. A storm of emotion passed through him, relief, disbelief, and something darker, rage. They tried to erase me. To take everything I am. He coughed weakly, and Lyra quickly supported him. I must confront them. They cannot. No, Lyra said firmly, her hands on his chest, feeling his pulse racing. Not yet. You are not strong enough. You must regain your strength. If you go above ground now, you will die. We must be patient. Kale's silver eyes, sharp as steel even in weakness, locked on hers. For the first time, Lyra felt the full weight of his presence. He was a predator, a king, a force of nature. But here, in this quiet room, stripped of his armor, stripped of his warriors, he was vulnerable. And yet, in that vulnerability, something shifted between them, a connection neither fully understood, but both instinctively felt. Days turned into weeks. Kale grew stronger with each passing sunrise. Lyra's healing magic intertwined with his own natural resilience, forging a bond deeper than either of them could name. Her presence seemed to awaken something within him, a spark he thought lost forever. Outside, the kingdom buzzed with rumors. The Queen Mother had declared the funeral rites complete, but whispers began to circulate. Shadows seen near the burial site at night, faint traces of silver energy in the air, the scent of the Alpha lingering where he should no longer be. The elders debated whether dark forces were at work, while loyal warriors stood confused and uneasy. Lyra had to be meticulous. Every day, she moved Kale's resting place to avoid detection, creating hidden niches and secret tunnels that only she knew. The work was exhausting, both physically and mentally. Yet each time Kale's eyes fluttered open to meet hers, her exhaustion felt lighter. She had chosen this path, to save a king, to defy fate, to risk everything, and she would not waver. Kale began speaking again, slowly, carefully. He shared fragmented memories of the night he was poisoned, shadows moving in the throne room, whispered voices, a dagger he never saw. His recollections were painful, but vital. Each piece of the puzzle brought them closer to the truth. And with each revelation, Lyra's determination hardened. Whoever had tried to kill him would pay, but only when the time was right. One evening, as the moon rose high and silvered the crypts, Kale turned toward her. His voice was low, almost a growl. I owe you my life. Lyra's heart pounded. You owe me nothing. I could not let you die. Not when. Her voice faltered, and she could not finish. Not when the truth of her feelings threatened to spill into the silence. Kale reached out, brushing a hand over hers. The contact was electric, a silent promise that neither words nor fear could erase. In that moment, Lyra knew that the bond between them had grown into something more profound than loyalty or gratitude. It was survival, yes, but it was also trust. It was connection. Yet danger still lurked. The traitor who had tried to kill Kale remained unknown, hidden among allies and enemies alike. Any misstep could undo weeks of recovery, any careless glance could betray them. Lyra and Kale existed in a fragile bubble, a world apart from the palace above, where time itself seemed to bend around them. And as the moonlight spilled across the stone floor, glinting off Kale's silver hair, Lyra realized something that made her blood run cold and warm at once. The heart that shouldn't have beaten, the life that shouldn't have endured, had survived because of her. But survival was only the beginning. Soon, the shadows above ground would stir, whispers would turn to accusations, and the fragile illusion of death would crumble. And when that happened, neither Lyra nor Kale would be able to hide any longer. They would have to face the world, together, against impossible odds, bound by a secret that could either save or destroy them both. The palace above ground moved through its rituals as if nothing had changed, yet beneath its gilded floors, a secret world thrived in the shadows. The Alpha King, Kale, was alive, and every breath he took in the hidden crypt was a defiance of fate itself. Days passed slowly. Kale's strength returned in uneven waves, his muscles tightening with each careful motion, his reflexes regaining the precision that had once made him a legend among warriors. Yet the poison had left scars beyond the flesh, trust had been shattered, and every whisper of sound above ground made his silver eyes flash with vigilance. Lyra watched him, guiding his exercises, holding him steady when doubt or fear overwhelmed his mind. Their existence became a delicate dance. Each movement, each decision, had to be calculated. The hidden tunnels beneath the palace became Kale's new training ground. He learned to move silently, to sense the vibrations of footsteps in the corridors above, to anticipate danger with an almost supernatural awareness. Lyra's hands often rested on his back or shoulders, steadying him, channeling her healing energy into his recovery. The bond between them grew with each passing hour, a silent, unspoken connection, deep and impossible to define in words. Kale was not a man accustomed to dependency, yet he found himself leaning on her. Her presence became the anchor that kept him from sinking into despair. He remembered the betrayal that had brought him to death's doorstep, and the rage that had flared in his chest now mingled with gratitude, and something more, something fragile, delicate, and terrifying. Lyra, in turn, had to navigate emotions she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. She had saved him, yes, but the way her heart raced when his hand brushed hers, the way her pulse quickened when his silver gaze held hers, made her realize that she had moved far beyond the role of healer. She was entwined in the king's life, and perhaps, in ways she had not admitted, his survival had entwined itself with her own soul. Outside, the kingdom grew restless. Whispers of the Alpha King's spirit circulated among the courtiers and servants. Strange phenomena, a door that opened on its own, shadows that seemed to move against the light, the faint scent of Kale's presence near the burial site, fueled speculation and fear. Some called it a curse, others spoke of a dark magic rising within the palace. The elders convened in secret councils, their eyes sharp, their suspicion deepening. Every step of Kale's recovery had to be cloaked in secrecy. Lyra devised careful routines. He would train while the shadows moved across the crypts, practicing silent strikes, balancing his regained strength with caution. His body learned to move again, but his mind sharpened even more. He plotted, silently, unseen by all but the Omega who had saved him. In these quiet hours, Kale began to speak, not of battles or betrayal, but of plans, of the future he intended to reclaim. "They think me dead," he murmured one night, his voice a low growl that resonated in the hollow crypt. "But they underestimate the patience of a king." Lyra's hands rested lightly on his arm. "And what will you do when the world learns the truth?" He smiled faintly, a shadow of steel behind the kindness of his gaze. "The world doesn't get to decide. Not anymore. I do." Yet even as Kale's confidence returned, Lyra sensed the quiet storm gathering around them. Someone, perhaps many, had conspired to end the life of the Alpha. Whoever they were, their reach extended beyond the palace walls. Every day above ground could bring new threats, spies, assassins, those loyal to the conspirators. Their hidden world beneath the stone and shadow was temporary, but it was all they had. Kale's awakening also brought heightened awareness of the dangers surrounding them. His senses, sharpened by the survival instinct that had kept him alive, detected even the faintest anomaly. A whisper of movement in the corridors above could no longer be ignored. A faint scent of an unfamiliar wolf could trigger hours of cautious surveillance. Lyra became his eyes and ears in ways beyond healing, guiding him, warning him, teaching him the patience of the hunted. The bond between them grew more profound in these moments of survival. Words were unnecessary. A glance, a touch, a shared breath spoke volumes. Kale began to understand the depth of her courage, her intuition, and her unwavering dedication. And Lyra realized that she no longer feared the storm of the world above because she had become a storm herself, by his side. But patience was tested. One evening, as the moon cast long silver shadows across the crypt, Kale's eyes narrowed. A distant vibration had reached him, subtle yet unmistakable. Someone moved with purpose above ground, stealth matched to skill. "They are close," he said quietly, rising on unsteady legs. "Someone knows, or senses, that I live." Lyra's hands flew to steady him. "You cannot go up now," she warned, voice tight. "You are not ready. We will be discovered, and everything we've built, your life, will be at risk." He studied her, the weight of a king in exile and a warrior in hiding mirrored in his gaze. "Then we prepare. We cannot wait forever." And so, beneath the palace, the Alpha King and the Omega who had saved him began to plan. Every moment became a lesson in stealth, strategy, and secrecy. Lyra showed Kale how to move without leaving a trace, how to read the subtle signs of danger, and how to trust not only her guidance but the instincts that had saved him once before. Outside, the world mourned a king who did not exist. Inside, the king prepared to reclaim a life stolen from him, and the Omega learned that saving a life meant more than healing wounds. It meant facing every shadow, every secret, and every danger together. The crypt, once a place of refuge, now became a forge for both their bodies and spirits. Strength was rebuilt, courage rekindled, and a bond formed in the crucible of life and death, unspoken, unbreakable, and destined to change the course of the kingdom forever. For in the shadows, truths were whispered, plans were made, and a king whose heart should have stopped now pulsed with purpose. And beside him, the Omega who had dared to defy fate would stand, not just as a healer, but as the keeper of his life and the guardian of his destiny. The kingdom above ground continued its mourning, draped in black and silver, yet beneath the gilded halls, a quiet storm gathered. Kale, the Alpha King, had regained enough strength to move with purpose, though every step required caution, every breath measured. The poison had left scars deeper than the flesh could show. Trust had to be rebuilt, patience exercised, and instincts sharpened anew. Lyra remained at his side, guiding, healing, and instructing him in ways the world above could never understand. Her hands had become the instruments of his survival, steadying his body, nurturing his spirit, and instilling a careful balance of restraint and cunning. She taught him how to breathe quietly in the shadows, how to sense the tremors of distant footsteps, and how to read the faintest disturbances in the air. Skills he would need when the kingdom above discovered the impossible truth, that he lived. Their days were a mixture of training and vigilance. Kale's body regained its legendary strength, yet Lyra insisted on measured exercises to prevent setbacks. Each night, the crypt seemed to expand in his perception. Walls became familiar allies, corners hiding dangers he had never noticed before, and tunnels that had once been mere refuge became intricate paths for escape and observation. Kale learned to move like a shadow, silent, unseen, powerful, yet guided by the hands of the Omega who had brought him back from death itself. Evenings became their most perilous hours. The air above ground carried whispers and subtle vibrations that hinted at secrets, conspiracies, and spies. Kale had once ruled with certainty, with the authority of an alpha whose mere presence commanded obedience. Now, he ruled only in shadows, unseen and unheard. His power felt only through the pulse of his heartbeat beneath the stone. Every sound of approaching footsteps made him tense, every flicker of movement a potential threat. And yet, he never faltered when Lyra's voice soothed him, her presence steadying his nerves, her touch reminding him that he had been given life again. It was during one such night that Kale first sensed the danger of betrayal anew. A faint stir in the outer corridors reached his ears, subtle yet deliberate. The movement was precise, cautious, as though the intruder had trained to avoid detection. Kale's silver eyes glimmered in the candlelight as he rose on unsteady legs, every nerve alert. "They've found a trace," he murmured, his voice a low growl, almost instinctive. "Someone is seeking the truth. Someone suspects I live." Lyra's eyes widened, but she quickly masked her fear. "We must remain hidden," she urged. "You are not ready to face them." He studied her silently, then nodded. "Patience," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of command even in secrecy. "We wait, but we prepare." Preparation became their constant companion. They reinforced the crypt's hidden passages, set subtle traps and misdirections, and Kale trained relentless. His body regaining the lethal precision that had once made him feared across kingdoms. Lyra watched with a mixture of awe and worry. She had healed his wounds, nurtured his spirit, and now she guided him in tactics that would allow him to reclaim what was stolen from him. Yet, even in the safety of the shadows, the world above ground pressed in. Rumors of the king's ghost, whispers of unnatural events, and unexplained tremors in the palace fueled suspicion. The Queen Mother fretted, torn between grief and unease. The elders convened in secrecy, their eyes sharp, their voices tense with the knowledge that some force had defied death. Warriors patrolled corridors and forests, seeking signs of life that might betray Kale's existence. It was in the tension of those nights that Kale realized a truth he could not ignore: he could not remain hidden forever. Patience was necessary, but action was inevitable. The traitors who had sought his death remained at large, and if he delayed, they would grow bolder, their reach extending even further into his kingdom. Lyra's role became more crucial than ever. She was not just a healer or a guide, she was a protector, confidant, and silent strategist. Her knowledge of herbs, poisons, and subtle energies became weapons in their arsenal. She helped Kale understand how to move unseen, to mask his presence, and to sense danger before it reached them. And in these quiet moments, trust deepened between them, binding them in a way neither had anticipated. One night, under the ghostly glow of the full moon filtering through the cracks in the stone ceiling, Kale finally spoke of the future. "When the time comes," he said, his voice measured, "I will return. I will expose those who betrayed me and reclaim what is mine. But until then, we remain shadows." Lyra nodded, though her heart trembled. "And I will be here," she whispered. "Through every shadow, every danger, every secret. You will not face it alone." He looked at her then, his silver eyes softening, a mixture of gratitude, trust, and something far deeper, something that neither of them dared name aloud. "You saved me," he said quietly. "Not just my life, my soul. If I survive this, it will be because of you." The crypt was silent save for their breathing and the faint sounds of the world above. Shadows moved along the walls, flickering and bending in the candlelight, as if aware of the secrets hidden below. And in that quiet, Kale and Lyra understood that survival alone was not enough. They would have to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast the enemies that lurked in the light above, enemies who believed death had claimed their king. For the first time since his near demise, Kale felt purpose sharpen into clarity. And Lyra, ever watchful, ever steadfast, felt a key. Certainty. The bond formed in these shadows would shape not just their lives, but the fate of the kingdom itself. The first stirrings of rebellion, of danger, and of vengeance were in motion. And in the hidden crypts, Kale and Lyra prepared for the day when shadows would no longer suffice, the day when life, death, and destiny would collide. The days in the hidden crypt passed with a rhythm of quiet intensity. Kale's body was no longer weak, his movements were precise, each motion a whisper of the Alpha's former power. Yet the poison had left more than physical scars, it had left a wound in his trust, a shadow over his perception of the world. Every sound above ground, every subtle vibration through the palace floors, was now a potential threat, and Kale's silver eyes missed nothing. Lyra remained at his side, her presence both a comfort and a guide. She had grown into a quiet force beside him, the steady pulse in his shadowed life. Her hands, once delicate and uncertain, now carried the strength of a healer who had saved the life of a king. Her voice, soft and resolute, became the tether between the king and the dangerous unknown that surrounded them. Above ground, the kingdom thrived under false illusions. Courtiers whispered of strange occurrences in the palace, objects misplaced, shadows flitting where no light should fall, the scent of Kale lingering in places where his presence was impossible. The Queen Mother, while outwardly composed, could not ignore the unease in her veins, the gnawing suspicion that death had not claimed her son. The elders debated, their voices hushed yet sharp, whether a dark magic had intervened or if the Alpha's spirit lingered to punish those who had betrayed him. Kale and Lyra had no illusions about time. Each day spent in the crypt was a day closer to discovery. They reinforced hidden passages, studied the habits of the palace guards, and monitored the patterns of those who moved unseen above ground. Every detail mattered, the smallest oversight could mean exposure. Kale's mind, once solely focused on survival, began turning to strategy. He observed, deduced, and planned. He did not yet confront his enemies, for strength was as necessary as patience. He studied the hierarchy of the court, the relationships between the elders, and the subtle dynamics that could be exploited. He learned to anticipate betrayal before it was enacted, training not just his body, but his mind to reclaim dominion over the shadows. Lyra noticed the changes in him. The spark that had nearly died with the poison now burned brighter, sharper, and more dangerous. The king she had saved was no longer merely recovering, he was becoming a force that would demand reckoning. And with each passing day, she realized her role had expanded beyond heal. She was confidant, strategist, and silent partner in his resurrection. One night, as the moonlight filtered through a narrow crack in the ceiling, Kale spoke of what he had learned. His voice was steady, measured, carrying the weight of command even in secrecy. "The traitor is close," he said. "Not a soldier, not a servant. Someone with knowledge, access, and influence. Someone who believed my death would secure their power." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You think it is someone from the inner council?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Yes. They know the palace, the rituals, the defenses. They could have orchestrated the poison without suspicion. We must be cautious. We cannot act blindly." Caution became their creed. Kale moved through the crypt like a shadow of his former self, practicing restraint even as his instincts screamed for confrontation. Lyra taught him patience as a weapon, showing him how to conserve energy, hide movements, and sense threats before they arrived. Together, they became a silent storm, preparing to strike when the time was right. The bond between them deepened with these trials. Words were unnecessary. A glance, a touch, a shared understanding was enough. Kale began to trust her implicitly, his survival intertwined with her guidance. And Lyra, despite the danger, found a growing sense of purpose. Saving a king had transformed into something greater, a shared mission, a partnership forged in life, death, and secrecy. The conspiracies above ground were only beginning to stir. Whispers of rebellion, manipulation, and treachery spread among the nobles, creating ripples that would soon demand Kale's attention. Lyra and Kale prepared to navigate this treacherous web, training in silence, learning the palace's secrets, and observing the weaknesses of those who believed the king dead. One evening, as Kale stretched his recovered limbs, he paused and looked at Lyra with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "When I return," he said, his voice low, "I will not only expose the traitor, but I will reclaim everything they stole. This kingdom will know that I live, and that betrayal carries a cost." Lyra nodded, her fingers brushing his arm. "And I will be with you," she whispered. "Through every danger, every shadow. You will not face them alone." For a moment, the world beyond the crypt ceased to exist. There was only Kale, only life reclaimed from the brink of death, and the silent promise that they would face whatever storm came together. But the shadows above were restless. The first stirrings of rebellion, subtle manipulations of influence, and whispered threats were gathering. Soon, Kale and Lyra would no longer be able to remain hidden. The king who should have been dead was alive, and the forces that had conspired against him would so on realize that the game they had started was far from over. In the crypt's stillness, beneath the moon's pale gaze, a plan began to form. Not just for survival, but for reclamation. Not just for revenge, but for justice. And Lyra, who had defied fate to save a king, would now help him navigate the treacherous path ahead, a path fraught with danger, secrets, and shadows that threatened to consume them both. The palace above ground hummed with the false serenity of morning. Nobles moved in quiet procession, their faces pale with grief, their whispers laced with speculation about the king's spirit and the strange occurrences surrounding his funeral. Yet beneath the polished floors and gilded walls, the truth lingered. Kale was alive, hidden in the shadows, rebuilding himself in secret. Kale's body had recovered nearly fully. Muscles that had once felt weak now rippled under his skin, controlled by the precision of a mind honed by survival and necessity. Every step he took in the crypts was deliberate, every breath a measure of patience and strength. But physical power alone could not reclaim a kingdom. Kale knew this. Knowledge, observation, and timing were just as vital as the force of an alpha's strike. Lyra remained at his side, her presence both a shield and a guide. Her role had grown beyond that of healer. She was confidant, strategist, and silent partner. Together, they became a careful machine of preparation, aware of every shadow, every whisper, every heartbeat above ground that could threaten the fragile veil they had woven. It was during one quiet night that Kale first sensed the deeper currents of betrayal. The traitor had acted subtly, leaving trails meant to be invisible to all but the keenest eyes. Kale observed patterns in guard movements, the way whispers carried through hallways, and the placement of seemingly innocuous objects. Each detail told a story of manipulation, of plotting, and of malice. "They move with confidence," Kale murmured, his silver eyes reflecting candlelight. "They think me gone. They believe the Alpha is dead, and with that illusion, they act boldly." Lyra nodded, her hands resting lightly on his arm. They will make mistakes. They always do. Patience and observation will reveal them. Cale's mind worked like a silent blade, piecing together fragments of information. He identified subtle alliances forming in the court, factions of nobles vying for power in the vacuum created by his supposed death. Some were greedy, others ambitious, but all were blind to the fact that he remained alive, hidden in plain shadows. Lyra watched him with a mixture of awe and concern. He had changed since his near-death experience. The Alpha she had saved was no longer only the fierce, commanding leader of the Bloodmoon Pack. He had become calculating, precise, a predator in waiting. Yet, beneath that armor of strategy and strength, there remained a vulnerability, a silent acknowledgement that the world above ground had tried to claim his life and failed. Their bond deepened in those days of quiet vigilance. Every shared glance, every touch, every whispered conversation solidified the connection that had begun when Cale first drew breath in her hands. Lyra had given him life, he had given her purpose. And as they moved through their secret hours together, that purpose intertwined with the inevitability of destiny, forging an alliance that neither could deny. The first encounter with the traitor's agents came unexpectedly. Shadows moved in the tunnels above, faint and deliberate, the careful padding of boots trained to avoid detection. Cale and Lyra held their breath, frozen against the cold stone, every sense alert. "They are close," Cale whispered, muscles coiled. "They must not find us." Lyra's pulse raced. She had never felt fear like this before, the fear of being discovered with a king who was meant to be dead, of being punished not for crime but for defying fate. She pressed a hand against Cale's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of life beneath her fingers, and drew strength from it. The intruders paused near a concealed entrance to the crypts. Cale could sense their hesitation, their confidence faltering at some inexplicable intuition that the Alpha was not gone. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped from the shadows, silent as the grave, and watched. The agents whispered among themselves, debating the strange aura in the corridor. Lyra held her breath as Cale's presence made itself known, not through violence, but through sheer, overwhelming command. The agents sensed it, the hair on their necks rising, their bodies tensing. Without a sound, Cale forced them back, an unseen force pressing against their instincts. Slowly, they retreated, their steps faltering, and vanished into the darkness above. Lyra exhaled quietly, trembling. Cale turned to her, his silver eyes reflecting a mix of warning and reassurance. "They will come again," he said. "And next time, we must be ready." Weeks passed with the tension of constant vigilance. Cale honed his skills in stealth, combat, and strategy, learning to anticipate the traitor's moves even before they occurred. Lyra worked tirelessly alongside him, blending her healing magic with subtle wards and protections, ensuring that each movement, each escape, and each countermeasure was perfectly executed. But even as they prepared, the court above ground continued its deception, unaware of the storm building beneath their feet. Whispers of rebellion and power struggles spread through the palace, fracturing alliances and sowing distrust. Cale watched carefully, noting the smallest misstep, the quietest betrayal, and the slightest flicker of fear in the eyes of those who thought him dead. One night, as the moon rose high and pale above the palace, Cale turned to Lyra. His voice, low and commanding, carried the weight of destiny. "When the time comes, we strike. Not with fury, but with precision. Every conspirator, every traitor, every hidden hand that sought my death, they will face the consequences." Lyra nodded, her hand brushing against his arm. "And we will face it together," she said. A silence followed, deep and resonant, filled with the unspoken understanding that the Alpha King, alive against all odds, was no longer merely surviving. He was preparing to reclaim his kingdom, to expose the conspiracies, and to punish those who had dared to betray him. And beside him, the Omega who had defied fate to save him would stand, not as a bystander, but as a force equal to the shadows, equal to the storm, and equal to the destiny that awaited them both. In the stillness of the crypt, beneath the pale moonlight, a plan was born. A plan of patience, strategy, and inevitable confrontation. The echoes of betrayal would not go unanswered. And when the storm above ground collided with the storm below, the world would finally see that the Alpha King was not dead, and that the Omega who had saved him was more than any of them had anticipated. The kingdom above ground moved through its fragile routines, unaware that the Alpha King, Kale, was alive and watching from the shadows. The air was thick with false mourning. Nobles walked with measured steps, their whispers carefully crafted to conceal ambition, fear, and subtle betrayal. Yet beneath the palace, in the crypts hidden from every eye, Kale sharpened himself like a blade. Each muscle, each movement, each thought was honed for the moment he would reclaim what was stolen from him. Lyra remained his constant anchor. Her presence was more than support, it was the silent pulse of his resurrection. Every touch, every whispered instruction, every careful adjustment of posture or stance reminded Kale that he had been given a second chance, not by fate, but by the courage of one who defied it. She had nurtured his body, healed his wounds, and strengthened his mind. Now, she became the co-architect of his return, guiding him as he navigated the dangerous web of palace politics without revealing himself. Kale spent hours observing the palace above through carefully hidden apertures. Every pattern of movement among the nobles, every whispered exchange, every subtle gesture was analyzed. Some courtiers showed loyalty, others opportunism, and a few, dangerous ambition cloaked in respect, drew his immediate suspicion. The traitor's influence runs deeper than I anticipated, Kale said one night, his voice low, thoughtful. They have allies who move unseen, ready to strike at the first hint of my return. Lyra nodded, tracing her fingers over a map of the palace corridors she had drawn from memory. We need to anticipate their moves, control what they see, manipulate what they believe, she said. Illusion can be as strong a weapon as steel. Thus began a meticulous campaign of subtle deception. Kale and Lyra created false trails, planted whispers, and manipulated perception. A guard who thought he had seen a shadow in the crypt above ground reported it as a trick of the moonlight. Courtiers who noticed subtle disturbances were dismissed by Lyra as mere coincidence. Each small act of control strengthened the illusion that Kale remained dead, while the king regained command over the hidden currents of his kingdom. Even as Kale's strategy unfolded, his trust in Lyra deepened. She was no longer merely the healer who had saved his life, she was his partner in survival, in cunning, and in silent war. Her insight guided his decisions, her intuition predicted the enemy's moves, and her unwavering loyalty fortified his resolve. In moments of quiet, he would study her face, noticing the determination in her eyes, the strength in her hands, and the fear she hid beneath her calm exterior. For the first time, Kale realized that she was not just his savior, she had become indispensable to his purpose, and perhaps, more than he dared to acknowledge, to his heart. Their nights were spent in planning, training, and observation. Kale perfected his skills in stealth, learning to move without leaving a trace, while Lyra taught him the subtleties of reading human behavior, detecting lies, and recognizing hidden motives. They explored the tunnels beneath the palace, discovering secret chambers, forgotten passageways, and vantage points from which Kale could observe without being seen. Each discovery added layers to their advantage, yet each also reminded them of the fragile balance they maintained. One mistake could undo everything. The first test came sooner than expected. One evening, as the moon bathed the palace in silver light, Kale sensed movement above ground, not ordinary footfalls, but something deliberate, calculated. Someone sought the crypt, someone who suspected that death had not claimed him. They are coming, Kale whispered, muscles coiled, senses alert. Be ready. We cannot fail. Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she prepared protective wards around their entrance. We must remain hidden, she said. If they find us, it will be the end. The intruders moved with care, but Kale's perception, sharpened by weeks of hiding and observation, detected every nuance. The slight hesitation in their steps, the uneven breathing of those untrained in stealth, the subtle scent of a wolf who had never ventured near the crypt before. Slowly, silently, Kale positioned himself, shadow blending into shadow, ready to act without being seen. The intruders paused at a junction. Their confidence faltered as if sensing the unseen presence that watched them. Kale did not move, did not speak. Instead, he allowed the weight of his presence, the instinctive aura of an alpha, to press upon them, subtle yet undeniable. Fear settled over them, a primal recognition that the king was not gone. Lyra exhaled quietly, her hand brushing Cale's arm in reassurance. He met her gaze with a sharp, silent affirmation. They would survive, they would remain hidden, and they would strike when the time was right. Days turned into weeks with the tension of constant vigilance. Cale and Lyra's partnership became seamless, their movements perfectly synchronized, their understanding unspoken but absolute. They became a force unseen yet powerful, shaping the palace above ground without ever revealing themselves. Yet even as they maneuvered in secrecy, the web of betrayal tightened. The traitors' reach extended further than they had imagined. Subtle manipulations in the court, whispers that sowed doubt among allies, and subtle acts of sabotage hinted at the dangerous mind behind the conspiracy. Cale realized that reclaiming his kingdom would require not only strength and strategy but also cunning, patience, and the unyielding support of the Omega who had restored him to life. One night, Cale stood at a hidden vantage point, watching the flickering torches of the palace guards below. The moonlight highlighted the contours of his face, sharp and commanding, even in secrecy. Lyra joined him silently, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "When the time comes," he said quietly, "we will no longer remain in the shadows. We will expose every conspirator, every hidden hand, and reclaim what is mine." Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with determination. "And I will be by your side," she whispered. "Through every danger, every shadow, every betrayal." In the crypt's stillness, the plan began to crystallize. Survival had become more than escape, it had become preparation. Rebirth had become strategy. And the Alpha King, whose life had been stolen, would rise not just to survive, but to reclaim, to command, and to punish those who had dared to defy fate. The nights grew longer as Cale honed himself in secret, the shadows of the palace becoming both his training ground and his shield. The Alpha King, thought dead by all above ground, moved with purpose beneath the marble floors, unseen, unheard, yet every motion calculated to reclaim the life and kingdom that had been stolen from him. Lyra was always by his side, a constant presence that balanced strength with caution. She had become far more than healer, she was strategist, observer, and confidant. Every plan, every move Cale made was guided by her insight. Her eyes, trained to detect the faintest anomaly, caught details the Alpha himself might have missed. Her intuition was sharper than any blade in the palace armory, and Cale had come to rely on it as much as his own senses. Their days blurred into nights as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation with the traitor and the web of conspirators who sought Cale's death. Each night, Cale would move through the hidden corridors, practicing stealth, strategy, and the subtle manipulation of perception. Lyra would observe from shadowed alcoves, offering silent advice or gentle corrections, guiding him through the labyrinth of secrecy and subterfuge. The first direct encounter came unexpectedly. A small group of the traitor's agents ventured into the outer corridors, testing the crypt's defenses. Cale sensed them before they reached the entrance, every instinct honed from survival screaming that danger approached. "Stay hidden," he whispered to Lyra, his voice low and commanding. She nodded, blending into the shadows, her heart pounding as she watched him move like a specter. Cale did not confront them immediately. Instead, he observed, learning their patterns, listening to their whispers, noting the weaknesses in their coordination. The Alpha had become more than a survivor, he had become a hunter, waiting for the exact moment to strike. As the intruders moved deeper into the corridors, Cale unleashed a subtle wave of intimidation. He did not raise a weapon, he did not make a sound. Yet the sheer presence of the Alpha, the instinctive aura of dominance that radiated from him even in shadows, unnerved them. The intruders faltered, exchanged uncertain glances, and slowly retreated, unaware that they had been observed by the very king they believed dead. Lyra exhaled quietly, tension leaving her body in a rush. Cale turned to her, his silver eyes reflecting a mixture of satisfaction and warning. "They will come again," he said. "And next time, we cannot rely on fear alone." Weeks passed, each day sharpening Cale's skills and his understanding of the court above. He began subtle manipulations, moving pieces in ways that remained invisible to those who thought him gone. Messages were intercepted, alliances disrupted, and loyalty tested without a single soul suspecting the true force behind the changes. Lyra worked alongside him, ensuring that every maneuver, every whispered adjustment, strengthened their position without exposing them. Yet with every calculated move, the risk grew. The traitor's reach extended further than they had imagined, and Cale understood. That patience alone was not enough. Eventually, action would be necessary, but timing was crucial. He could not reveal himself until he had full control, until every hidden hand had been identified, and until the kingdom itself was prepared to see the Alpha King rise from the dead. Amidst the careful plotting, the bond between Cale and Lyra deepened. They shared moments of quiet reflection, brief exchanges that reminded them of their humanity beyond the shadows of secrecy and vengeance. Lyra's courage, wisdom, and unwavering presence had become the anchor in Cale's turbulent world, and he realized that his survival was not complete without her by his side. One evening, as the moon cast silver light through the narrow cracks of the crypt, Cale turned to Lyra. "We are ready," he said, his voice calm but edged with determination. "Not yet for the throne, but for the first step. We reclaim what belongs to me, and we expose the traitors who dared to think they could end me." Lyra met his gaze, determination mirrored in her eyes. "I will stand with you," she said softly. "Through every shadow, every danger. You will not face this alone." The Alpha King nodded, the weight of destiny settling across his shoulders. The silent reclamation had begun. Every shadow moved with purpose, every step was calculated, and every heartbeat was synchronized with the Omega who had given him life. The first subtle victories were already in motion. Disloyal courtiers exposed in whispers, traitorous alliances disrupted before they could act, and the kingdom slowly bending under the unseen hand of the king who should have been dead. Cale felt the surge of power returning, tempered by patience and strategy. In the crypt, beneath the palace that believed him gone, Cale and Lyra prepared for the inevitable storm. The veil of deception above ground remained strong, but it was only temporary. The moment of confrontation, when life, loyalty, and vengeance collided, drew ever closer. And when it came, the Alpha King would not be the same man who had been poisoned and nearly buried alive. He would be stronger, sharper, and more dangerous than any enemy could imagine, and Lyra would be at his side, unyielding and unbroken, the silent force that had guided him back from death itself. The silent reclamation had begun. The shadows were no longer merely a refuge, they had become a weapon, a strategy, and a promise. And when the time came, the world would finally understand that the Alpha King was alive, and that the Omega who had saved him was far more than a healer. The morning sun poured golden light over the palace, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the marbled floors. The kingdom above still believed its Alpha King was dead, yet beneath the very feet of those mourning, Cale moved with the precision, confidence, and power of a man reborn. The final phase of his silent reclamation had begun. Cale's silver eyes gleamed with resolve. Every lesson learned in the hidden crypts, every movement perfected, every ounce of patience and cunning honed over weeks of secrecy, now converged into a single, unstoppable purpose. Beside him, Lyra moved with quiet certainty, her presence a stabilizing force, a reminder that his survival had been more than luck. It had been her courage, her skill, her unwavering devotion. They emerged from the shadows with the dawn. The hidden tunnels that had sheltered them for so long now became their path to justice. Every corridor, every secret passage, led them closer to the heart of the palace, and to the traitor who had thought they could steal a king's life and escape unpunished. Cale's presence above ground, though carefully hidden, sent ripples through the court. Guards sensed something amiss, courtiers noticed subtle disturbances, and whispers grew louder. Those who had plotted in secret began to feel unease. The Alpha King's influence, though unseen, had already begun to reclaim its hold. The first confrontation was inevitable. The traitor, a man who had moved boldly under the assumption of Cale's death, stood at the center of the throne room, surrounded by allies who believed themselves untouchable. The tension was electric, as though the very air anticipated the storm to come. Cale stepped forward from the shadows, silent as a predator. The traitor froze mid-sentence, eyes widening as the impossible truth crystallized. The Alpha King was alive. Shock rippled through the room like a wave, and fear replaced the smug confidence that had carried the conspirators until now. Lyra stood beside Cale, her hand lightly resting on his arm, grounding him, reinforcing the strength that radiated from him. She had trained him, guided him, healed him, and now she witnessed the culmination of every risk they had taken, every moment of preparation. Kale, the traitor whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. You cannot." Kale's voice cut through the room, low, commanding, and unyielding. "I am very much alive. And you, who thought you could end me, will answer for your treachery." The room erupted in chaos as Kale and Lyra moved with silent precision. Guards loyal to the conspirators attempted to react, but the Alpha King's strength, combined with his regained skill and Lyra's strategic guidance, made them no match. Every strike, every motion, was calculated, a perfect symphony of strength, speed, and intelligence. The traitor attempted to flee, but Kale was relentless. He cornered him in the very heart of the palace, the throne room that had witnessed betrayal and false triumph. Lyra watched silently, ready to intervene if needed, yet knowing that Kale had grown beyond what anyone had ever imagined. "You thought me dead," Kale said, silver eyes burning with authority. "But I am alive. And now, justice will be served." The traitor fell to his knees, terror overtaking arrogance, as Kale's power, tempered by weeks of patience and strategy, became undeniable. Every conspirator witnessed the Alpha King's return, and in that moment, the illusion of death shattered. Loyalty shifted instantly, fear spreading like wildfire. With the traitor defeated, Kale ascended to the throne, not merely as a survivor, but as a ruler reborn. The kingdom, once vulnerable to treachery and manipulation, now felt the unshakable presence of an alpha who had defied death itself. Lyra approached him, her hand brushing against his as she stood by his side. "It's over," she said softly. "You've reclaimed everything." Kale turned to her, silver eyes reflecting gratitude, admiration, and something far deeper, a connection forged in shadows, survival, and unspoken devotion. "No," he said, his voice filled with quiet power, "it's only just beginning. And you were my strength through it all. Without you, I would not be here." The court, now fully aware of the truth, bowed in reverence. The Alpha King had returned, stronger than before, and by his side stood the Omega who had dared to defy fate to save him. Their bond, forged in danger, secrecy, and survival, became visible to all, a symbol of loyalty, courage, and unbreakable partnership. Days later, the kingdom flourished under Kale's renewed rule. Traitors had been punished, loyalty restored, and trust rebuilt. Lyra, once hidden in the shadows, was now acknowledged not only as a healer but as the steadfast companion who had safeguarded the king's life and helped him reclaim his throne. In the quiet of the palace gardens, Kale and Lyra stood together, sunlight catching in Kale's silver hair. The world was no longer a threat, it had been tamed. And in that stillness, they allowed themselves to acknowledge what had grown silently between them, a bond deeper than duty, stronger than fear, and filled with the promise of a shared future. Kale took her hand, holding it with reverence and warmth. "We survived," he said quietly. "We endured. And now, we can live freely." Lyra smiled, her heart full, the weight of fear and struggle replaced by triumph and love. Together, she whispered. And so, the Alpha King who should have been dead rose not just to reclaim his throne, but to embrace the life he had been given, a life made whole by the Omega who had saved him. In the light of victory, the kingdom stood united, and two hearts, once bound by fate and shadow, now beat together openly, unafraid, and unstoppable. The first raw YS of dawn broke across the horizon, painting the palace walls with gold and amber. The air, once heavy with grief and whispers of death, now pulsed with life and renewal. The Alpha King, Kale, stood upon the balcony of his throne room, silver eyes gleaming in the morning light, surveying the kingdom that had once believed him lost forever. The shadows of the past lingered only as reminders of what had been overcome. Kale's body, once weakened by poison and betrayal, now radiated strength and confidence. Every movement carried the precision of a man who had faced death and survived, tempered by wisdom earned in the secrecy of the crypts and the guidance of the Omega who had defied fate to save him. Lyra stood beside him, her presence steady and unwavering, her hand lightly resting on his arm. She was no longer merely his healer, no longer a silent partner in survival. She was recognized as his equal in courage, intelligence, and purpose. The kingdom had shifted beneath the illusion of mourning. Loyalists who had endured in secret emerged, emboldened by Cale's return. Traitors were exposed, stripped of their titles, and cast into disgrace. The people, once fearful and uncertain, now rallied under the renewed and undeniable authority of the king who had returned from the brink of death. Cale turned to Lyra, the morning light glinting off his silver hair. "We did it," he said, voice quiet yet full of triumph. "The kingdom is ours to heal and to protect." Lyra's eyes sparkled, her lips curved in a soft smile. "Not just ours," she said. "It's the people's too. You fought for them, Cale. And you allowed me to fight alongside you." He pulled her closer, their foreheads touching, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured together, the poison, the betrayal, the endless nights of secrecy, the fear, and the unspoken bond that had grown between them in the shadows. "Without you," Cale murmured, "I would not have survived. You gave me life twice, once from death, and once from despair. You are my strength, Lyra." Their moment of quiet intimacy was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hall. Courtiers, soldiers, and citizens entered, bowing before the Alpha King and his Omega. They had heard of Cale's return, of the defeat of the traitors, and now they came to pay homage, to pledge loyalty, and to witness the restoration of a kingdom thought lost. Cale addressed them with authority, yet tempered with the compassion that had been strengthened through his trials. "The kingdom has endured," he said, his voice carrying over the hall. "We have faced betrayal, deceit, and the threat of death. But we are alive. We are united. And together, we will rebuild what was broken." Lyra stood beside him, her heart swelling with pride and relief. The whispers that had once haunted the palace, rumors of ghosts, of curses, of a king lost to death, were replaced by reverence, respect, and hope. The people saw not just a ruler restored, but a symbol of resilience, courage, and unwavering loyalty. In the days that followed, Cale worked tirelessly to heal the kingdom. The traitors were punished justly, disputes were resolved with fairness, and alliances that had once been fractured were strengthened. Lyra assisted him at every turn, not merely as a healer, but as a trusted advisor, guiding him in matters of strategy, diplomacy, and insight into the hearts of those around them. Together, they became not just leaders, but symbols of unity, hope, and enduring strength. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting the sky in deep purples and golds, Cale and Lyra walked through the palace gardens. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, the chirping of birds, and the gentle rustle of leaves, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension of the weeks they had spent in hiding. Cale took Lyra's hands in his own, silver eyes locking with hers. "The kingdom is reborn," he said softly. "But what is a kingdom without the one who saved my life, who stood by me when all others fled?" Lyra smiled, warmth radiating from her as she pressed closer. "It is ours together, Cale. We survived the shadows, we faced the storm, and now, we can finally live freely, together." He pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her as if he would never let go. For Cale, the king who had faced death, betrayal, and uncertainty, this was more than victory, it was fulfillment. And for Lyra, the Omega who had risked everything to save him, it was recognition, trust, and love finally acknowledged in the open. The palace, once a place of deception and sorrow, now thrummed with life. Laughter echoed through the halls, the citizens rejoiced, and the kingdom knew that its Alpha King had returned not just to rule, but to protect, to nurture, and to lead with wisdom and courage. Cale and Lyra stood together atop the balcony as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. Their hands intertwined, their hearts aligned, and their souls bound by trials endured and victories earned. The Alpha King had risen, the Omega had fulfilled her destiny, and a kingdom once on the brink of despair now flourished under the guidance of a king and his steadfast Omega. Together, Cale whispered. "Forever," Lyra replied.